Parashat Mishpatim, interesting parasha.
Yeah.
Especially the launch of it, the first halacha, which talks about a Jewish slave, an Eved Ivri.
That's right.
And I remember when I first encountered that as a newbie to being observant, I'm like, what? Such a thing as a Jewish slave? What could possibly be a Jewish slave within Judaism? And obviously I learned more about it. And I'm just like, wow, it's rehab, spiritual rehab. Wow, open your doors, bring someone in, show them the way, teach them values. Maybe they couldn't have that when they were growing up. Maybe they were from a rough side of town.
Yes, it's normally somebody who's stolen and can't pay back what he's stolen. So as a society, first of all, we're saying when you steal, we're not just going to write that off. The first thing that a person needs to understand is there's always responsibility. You have to, if you do something, you have to have responsibility to heal it and repair it. And so we're saying to him, we're not just going to write off whatever it is.
This is not okay. This is not okay.
It's not okay. And there are repercussions to your actions.
Right.
Okay. But on the other hand, we know that you haven't got money. So we need to put you in work so that you can get the money to repay, or so that you understand that there are repercussions. But as you said, the setting for it is actually rehabilitation, and the rules of what the owner has to do for the master is incredible. Like
incredible.
What have you heard?
I've heard that basically his sleeping arrangements have to be at least as good, if not better than yours.
That's right.
You have to make him comfortable, basically welcome. He's effectively a lodger and a host in your house for principally up to 6 years. And then if he decides, then you've got that whole business, which may or may not talk about, he probably falls in love with the family. Who wouldn't, if they're that nice? Can you imagine coming from a decrepit background for whatever reason, where you've had to steal, and then suddenly this wonderful, wonderful religious 𝘏𝘲𝘢 Shabbos family says, Bubala, it's okay. Here, come in. Big hugs. Come in. Here's Rivki. Here's Moishe. We're your brothers. And it's like, oh my God. And there's your room. He's like, walks in. It's like the Waldorf. Right. And he's like, this is all right. This is a bit cushy. But
what's fascinating about what you just said, that 6 year, you got a 6 year rehab, and then in theory he's supposed to go, and we want him to go because we don't want this. We want him to understand that he himself has the ability and the power to be able to build his own family just like this,
stand on his own 2 feet.
Right. And when he doesn't want to, we remind him that this isn't where he's supposed to be, but we'll give him up to the Jubilee year. But yes, this isn't where he's supposed to be.
So what did you want to add to?
Well, my feeling in general about the whole of Mishpatim, people come along and they say that there are, if you look in ancient times, there are codes of the ancient early settlements, the early, we begin to see in history, if you're coming up somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago, estimating. I mean, we believe that the world is 5,780 years. Right. 85 years old. But somewhere, if you look at historical records, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 years is the beginnings of communities, people who are willing to live together. And in order to keep those societies together, there were rule books or codes or mishpatim, right? Codes as to how you live your life. And you can look at Hammurabi's code. Yeah. There are some people who believe that Hammurabi is Nimrod, who was basically the nemesis of Abraham. But whether he was or not, we're talking about that time period. Around then,
like what existed in their society? What conclusion did they come to?
Well, if you have a look at those codes, what you'll see is a very, very structured rules of damages, right? Of how a person has to behave and what they're not allowed to take, and what if they do take, how they're punished. But what is completely missing from all of those codes is kindness, support for the needy who are in a different social strata to you. And an example like this, rehabilitation, the concept that somebody has done something wrong and they're not going to be punished for it. Instead, we're going to look at rehabilitating them is a completely Jewish concept. It did not exist before Judaism. There is no parallel to it until Western society created their Judeo-Christian value system. There was no such concept of rehabilitation. It's you did something wrong, you receive a punishment, and that's it.
Right. There was no value. Altruism is basically missing. Looking to the other. Looking
beyond yourself.
Right.
Yes. Or at least beyond your own family unit or your own social level. So, for example, in some of these codes, the top level is not allowed to kill each other, but they are allowed to kill a lower one, like a lower caste. Mm-hmm. And the lower caste, if they were to kill a higher caste, well, they're definitely going to be killed.
Right.
The concept of looking out for the orphan, the widow, the poor, and all of the responsibilities that the Torah turns to the people who have the money or who have the gifts that society or Hashem has given them, the responsibility on them to be able to have to look after the needier person, that is a purely Jewish Torah-given concept, and it doesn't exist anywhere else until other nations took on this concept.
We are always trying to understand what Hashem wants from us. And loosely speaking, and trying to summarize it, we only know what good is or how we should be based on what we're told, what he wants us to know. I think if you look around, it's like, what do people think God is? You ask people, what do you think God is? They'll say, they'll go for the big answer. If they believe, created everything. It's a very distant understanding of Hashem. It's not even a Hashem. It's just this being. He's this creator. What I think Mishpatim does, and the rest of the laws given, and basically the whole Torah as a law, L-O-R-E, if you can use it that way, and law, is that it's telling us who he is through these laws, like you said. Meaning, how do you know who Hashem is? Well, if he's instructed us in certain laws, why would he? Like these laws. He's teaching you that the other matters.
Right.
And otherwise, how would we know? How would we know that Hashem is altruistic? Let's say these didn't exist. What would distinguish him from another tribe if they weren't there?
Well, you could perhaps come to that understanding that he is altruistic through philosophy and perhaps logical exercise by saying that if he's infinite, he clearly doesn't need anything from us. So therefore, when he created the world, he created it to give. But I agree with you very much that these laws really point that out. And we're told, v'halachta b'drachav, the mitzvah for us of doing kindness to others is actually not written clearly in the Torah. The actual concept of gemilut chasadim.
Right.
There are examples of things like charity and other things like we're talking about with this slave, but the concept of gemilut chasadim in a broad terms is never written clearly. What the mitzvah that teaches us gemilut chasadim is exactly what you said. It's the words v'halachta b'drachav. You have to follow in God's ways. God is showing this is what I do. Just like you said, and we are then responsible for following his ways. If you want to know what goodness looks like, this is what goodness looks like.
Where do we see, though, aside from the Mishpatim, that involve Gimilut Chasadim, giving to other?
Where do we see God doing that?
Where do we? I mean, again, philosophically, it's pretty obvious.
So the sages say we see that God clothed the naked, which, by the way, wasn't just clothing the naked. It was. These are two beings who have gone directly against my instruction. They suddenly now realize that they're naked. And instead of telling them, I told you so, in your face, yeah?
Interesting.
Instead of saying that, like we said last week with Yitro, instead of saying that, instead he clothes them. right? We see that he buries the dead. We see that he visits the sick. And based on that, thou sages say, you see God doing all of this. He's now telling you, follow my ways. You do this as well, as altruistic as it's possible for you to be, although because you're human, it will never be 100% altruistic. But if I can...
So he demonstrates it. He actually demonstrates it.
With his laws and his actions, yes.
It's very interesting.
So just to add on one extra point to this, 2 weeks ago in Parashat B'Shalach, we had the song that they sang. And we see that the Jewish people, as part of the song, they take on upon themselves something. They say, Zeh Keli, this is my God, 𝘠𝗏𝗯𝗡𝗏. And I, after everything that I've witnessed here, 𝘠𝗏𝗯𝗡𝗏, and I will literally glorify him or beautify him. There's different explanations of what that means and how it plays out. But one of the explanations, which I think is really beautiful, is that the word anvehu is a contraction of two words, ani v'hu, I and he. This is my God, and I and he want to be a partner. I've realized now that my role in life, was the Jewish people were saying, is to partner in him to complete the world.
Emulate
is like following in his ways.
So this is
more than that. This is, you have created an imperfect world on purpose. Remember, they've just spent years in a Holocaust in Egypt.
That's not a small point you've made.
Right.
You've created an imperfect world on purpose. It's key.
And we've realized this. We've realized that this world is supposed to be imperfect. We'll never know fully why in every situation, but the world is created imperfect so that we have a role, so that we have a job to partner with you to bring the world to perfection. And that is what we're supposed to be thinking all the time with everything we're doing, whether it's learning Torah, doing chesed, looking after our family, job, everything. Whatever happens to be, in every single moment of our life, we're supposed to be thinking, right now, am I partnering with Hashem to bring the world to completion and perfection?